In this video, I'm going to use a humanoid character for my third-person controller. There is a lot of free and paid characters on Unity Asset Store. You could also provide your own character. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to use this space robot Kyle. It's a free character created by Unity Technologies, so I'm going to import this one into my Unity project. I'm just going to create a folder for it and name it Mesh. And I'm gonna drag this Kyle folder into my mesh. So here, as you can see, we are using a capsule for our mesh. I'm just going to delete that and use my robot humanoid character as the player. Let's give it some material, and that should do it. As you can see here, there is already an animator attached to this model. Most humanoid characters do have that, but make sure any character that you use, you are going to go to Rig and select humanoid as the animation type for it. So let's create an animator for this character, and I'm gonna name it third person animator. Now let's select our player and assign the animator controller we just created. And also make sure select the player layer for our character. Now let's open this animator controller and start bringing in our animation clips. I'm gonna start by creating some parameters. The first one is going to be a float, and I'm going to name it movement. Let's make two more floats. One is going to be move X, and the other one is going to be move Y. I also need to create booleans, one for grounded and another one to check if we are crouched. So I'm going to start by creating a new blend tree, and I'm going to name this one stand. Let's open this one. The blend type is going to be 1D, and I'm going to use movement as the parameter. I'm going to add 4 clips for our motions. Let's uncheck this one. The first one is going to be 0. This one is going to be 3. This is going to be 2, and this is going to be 1. 0 is for idle, 1 is for walking, 2 running, and 3 sprinting. If you remember, in the previous video, we downloaded some clips for this. So let's go to our animation folder, and in clips, here is the idle. This is walking, running, and sprinting. Let's add them here. This one is going to be stand idle. This is going to be stand walk, stand running, and stand sprint. So if I play this and change the movement value, you will notice that it will change the animation. So let's go back to our animator and create another blend tree. This is going to be a standing locked. Let's open this up, and for this one I'm going to use a 2D, and this is going to be move X, and this is going to be move Y. For this one we don't have sprinting. We only have running and walking. The first motion is going to be 0, 0, which is our stand idle. Create another one. This is going to be 1, 0, which is going to be our walking in the right direction. Stand walk right. Let's create another motion field. This is going to be 0, 1, which is going to be walking forward. Stand walk. Let's create another one. Choose -1 for X and 0 for Y. This is going to be walking on the left, and the last walking is going to be walking backward, which is going to be 0 on the X and -1 on the Y. Walk backward. And for the running, let's create another motion field. This is going to be 2, 0. It's going to be running on the right. Let's create another motion field. 0, 2 is going to be running forward. stand run, create another one, -2 and 0 running left, and the last one would be 0, -2 running backward. If you play this and change the values, you'll notice it's going to change the animation based on these values. Let's create another blend tree for our crouch. I'm gonna open this. This is going to be 1D and the parameter is going to be movement. Let's add 3 motion fields because we don't have a sprint, we only have running and walking. The first one is going to be crouch idle. This is going to be crouch walk, and the other one also is going to be crouch walk, because as you remember, we couldn't find the animation for crouch running, so we're just going to use the same animation with different speeds. So if I change this for 1, it's going to walk, and if I change it to 2, the animation is still slow. So let's just change this value to 2. It's not looking good, but we'll find better animation later. For now, let's just use this one. So let's go back to the animator. So let's create a new animation here, and I'm just going to name this falling. Let's assign the falling animation to this one, and here I'm going to make a transition from any state to falling if the grounded is false. And I'm going to uncheck has exit time, and here in the falling I'm going to make a transition to a standing whenever our grounded is true, and I'm going to uncheck this one. So it doesn't matter in any state that we are, if the grounded is false, we're just going to go to the falling animation. We also need to make transition between standing and crouched. Let's create a clip for it. This is going to be a stand to crouch, and let's choose the animation for it. And this is going to be crouch to a stand. Let's also create another boolean and name it locked. This determines if the camera is locked or not. So let's start making transitions. So if you are here and crouch becomes true, we're going to make this transition. Crouch is true, it doesn't have an exit time, and we're just going to make a transition to this one. This transition doesn't have any conditions, but has exit time is checked. The same thing for the standing locked. So now we're making a transition from crouched to standing whenever crouched is false. We're gonna uncheck that, and here we're gonna make a transition to a standing. It doesn't have any condition, but it has an exit time. And here between these two, we also make a transition. If the locked is true, make the transition to standing locked, and transition back whenever locked is false. So this should do it. Let's go back to our scene and play this game. As you can see, it's falling because the grounded boolean in the animator is false. But we can move around and even jump. So in order to fix this, we need to go to our code and start updating the values of our animator. So let's go to our script. To start, we need a reference to our animator. So let's create a region for our animation. We're going to create 3 methods. One is going to be initialize animator, the other one is going to update animator and late update animator. And let's go and call these methods. Here in the awake function, I'm going to say initialize animator. In the update, I'm going to say update animator, and do the same thing in the late update. It's going to be late update animator. So here in the animation region, let's create an animator variable. I'm also going to create a vector3 and name it last position. Here in the initialize animator, I'm going to get a reference of our animator. And I'm also assigning the last position to be the transform.position. Let's actually copy this and put it in the late update as well. So also in the late update, we are setting the last position to the transform.position. We also need to go to our movement region, and I want to create a toggle for our walk. Let's create a boolean for it. And here in the update movement, we are going to check if the player hitting a certain key. If the player hit a certain key, then we're going to reverse the walking. We also need to define a key for walk. So let's go to our input. And I'm just going to duplicate this sprint and name it walk. And I'm gonna use left alt. You can choose any key that you want. And let's go ahead and remove the left alt from here to avoid any interference. And that should do it. Let's go back to our code. So we also need to create another variable for walk speed. Let's go to our top here. I'm just going to create another variable here for walk speed. And here in the update, right over here, I'm gonna check if the walking toggle is true or not. And if it's true, I'm just going to use walk speed for our move speed. Also, let's move down here. And here I'm gonna make sure we are not gonna be able to crouch if our character is locked. So let's create a condition here and set the crouched equals to false, and we need a boolean to check if our camera is locked or not. Let's create a private boolean. So let's move over here and assign a value for our locked. We're going to open a parenthesis here. We're gonna set or and another parenthesis here. We're gonna say if the camera mode equals to camera mode.fix or camera mode equals to camera mode.locked. But for the locked mode, we need to make sure there is a camera target, and camera target is not equals to null. And here we say if crouched equals to true and also locked equals to true, set the crouch value to false. Besides that, we also need to check if we are grounded or not. So we're gonna put the locked in a parenthesis, and I'm gonna say if it's locked or if it's not grounded. Even if it's not grounded or it is locked, set the crouch to false. Now we have everything. It's time to go to our update animator and start applying the variables to our animator. So here in the animation, let's actually create a float. I'm going to name this anim movement, and we're going to set the value for this here in the update movement. So just like the move speed, I'm just going to assume anim movement is going to be value of 2, which is running. Now here I'm going to set it for walking, which is the value of 1. Here is going to be having a value of 3 for sprinting. And here we're going to check if we are moving or not. As you know, moving is going to be set based on the input. So if moving equals to false, then we're going to set the anim movement to 0. Let's actually rename this anim movement to anim movement target and create another one called anim movement. And here in the update animator, before we set the value of the movement, we're going to lerp the value of anim movement towards the target. For now, I'm just going to use 5 as the speed for the lerp, but we could put it in a variable and change it later. And finally, we set the movement parameter of our animator to anim movement. So let's go and check the result. As you can see, I can move around, I can walk around, or even I can sprint. But you might notice the animation a little bit weird. It needs to be fixed. So let's go back to our animation clips. Some settings we need to change. The reason our animations are not working properly is because of this checkbox here, root transform position on XZ. I'm going to uncheck this one for all the animation clips. That should fix our problem. So let's play and check this again. It's going to have an offset. The reason for this is we are using root motion for our animator. Let's go ahead and set the root motion for our animator to false. So here in the initialize animator, I'm just going to set the apply root motion to false. And let's play the game. As you can see, we can walk around or even sprint without any problem. Of course, we need to change the value of speeds to make it more realistic, but as you can see, it's working perfectly. As you can see, I could even crouch and stand with perfect transition, and even walk and run in the crouch mode. Of course, if you remember, we didn't have a proper animation for running, so we need to change that later. But for now, I think it's working good. So it's time to set the parameters for our move X and move Y. But before we do that, let's actually go to our update movement and add a condition here to our sprint. So whenever we hit the sprint key, and also we are not crouched. That is when we are sprinting. We don't want to sprint when we are in the crouch mode. So let's go to our update animator. So here let's start by getting a vector 3 And this is going to be our transform.position, our current position. We're going to set the y value of this position to 0. We're also going to set the y position of our last position to 0. If you remember, we are setting the last position in the late update. Here we're going to create another vector 3 and name it target movement. And target move is going to be transform, inverse transform from direction, and the direction is going to be position minus last position, and we're gonna normalize it. We also need to multiply this by any movement target. So it's going to give us a target move, and here I'm just going to create two more floats. It's going to be any move X and any move Y. Now let's assign these values by lerping. And we're going to lerp the any move X towards the target mode.X and also any move Y towards the target move.Z, and we're going to set these values into our animator. So we are done here in the update animator. Let's actually add another thing here. We also need to make sure we are not locked for our sprinting. So we're gonna add another condition to our sprint, and it's going to be not locked. So if we are not crouched and we are not locked, then we can sprint. So let's play the game. We can move around in the free mode. Let's change that to fixed mode. As you can see, we can walk around, walk backward, and we can even lock the camera on the specific target. Let's lock it on the cylinder we created. And as you can see, it's just going to lock on that. We can make this a lot more smoother by adding extra animation to the animator. Here in the standing locked, we could add other clips at 1 position, 1 - 1 position, and other positions here in the middle of these clips. For example, walk front right here, and it will make the player movement look a lot better. We could also change this one, and this also has some effect. Of course, it would be better if we go to our player and set proper speeds for these values. Choose a value that you're comfortable with and makes your animation and movement speed more in sync together. So I guess that's it for this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you had any questions you could ask me in the comments, send me an email, and I will respond as soon as possible. Thank you for watching.